Hi, I'm Erin Power.
And I'm Laura Rupsis.
We're certified health coaches, and this is Health Coach Radio.
This podcast is about the art, science, and business of health coaching.
We share our insider tips to help you become a better coach and entrepreneur.
And we interview expert guests to discover how they've made it in this growing field.
It's time for health coaches to make an impact.
It's time for Health Coach Radio.
Today's guest is Laura Rupsis. That's right. My co-host Laura is in the interviewee seat for today's conversation. It's been a few years since we touched base with Laura to hear what she's been up to in this health coaching space. Well, in addition to packing up and moving her whole life from Illinois to Florida, a move she was only able to make by making careful and deliberate plans over several years, Laura shares about a pretty cool coaching opportunity she had this past year, working with over 170 employees in a corporate setting. This will be great to listen to if you've ever wanted to break into corporate coaching or know more about Laura. Let me tell you quickly about something we've recently created that we're really excited about. It's My Primal Coach, a convenient app-based health coaching program that delivers daily lessons with actionable tips for losing weight, gaining strength and energy, sleeping better, managing stress, and more. It provides personal one-on-one coaching to help you stay on track and reach your wellness goals. And it was developed and delivered by the team behind Primal Health Coach Institute. We are experts in behavior change, and we understand how to get clients the results they desire. Our mission at My Primal Coach is the very same as our mission with Primal Health Coach Institute, to help 100 million people reclaim health and wellness through education and coaching. So check it out for yourself at myprimalcoach.com. We always love to see who's listening to us, so please take a screen grab of your podcast player and tag us on Instagram at Health Coach Radio. And hey, don't forget, you can always find the show notes for every episode at primalhealthcoach.com/radio. All right, without further delay, let's catch up with my Health Coach Radio podcast co-host, Laura Rupsis. Hi, Laura.
Hello, Erin. How are you?
Well, I'm my friend Laura on the podcast today.
Oh my God.
We're gonna talk about you. Yeah. We're gonna talk about you because we haven't checked in with you in years. I think when we started the podcast 3 years ago, we were some of the first guests. That makes sense. But lots has changed since then. Lots has changed, especially for you. So, but potentially people listening today weren't listening 3 years ago.
True.
Maybe they don't really know much about you and your backstory in terms of who you are, what you do, and how you got here. So why don't you kick us off with your general origin story?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think if people listen to this podcast, know little bits and pieces, because I'm, share a lot of that stuff. But, broadly speaking, I started professionally in the finance space, which is weird given that my degree was in elementary education. But I spent well over 20 years in finance. And because look, I found it interesting and I had a head for it, not necessarily accounting in numbers, but just understanding concepts and sales. So I spent 20 some odd years in finance in various roles. My last career was a sales role where I traveled around the state of Illinois, working with financial advisors, selling financial products, which was interesting. I got to talk about capital markets and yield curves and currencies, and I got to talk to new people every day, which was cool. And then the aftermath of the last bad, really bear market, the 2008-2009 sort of credit crisis, took all the fun out of all of it for me. And it really had me questioning, gosh, why am I doing this? And that period in time is when I really fell ill. And looking back, I had started this process earlier than that because that lifestyle, being on the road all the time, a high stressful job, was starting to sort of chip away at my health. I didn't realize it at the time. But then you add that additional stress onto things. The marketplace on just keeping that job became even more competitive. So you have to work even harder. I'm one of the very few females in that industry. Lo and behold, looking back now, it was at the root of what made me sick. So anyway, I was so sick, but no one could really tell me what was wrong. I just had like like the time, like I had like a sinus infection or pneumonia. It was all upper respiratory stuff and high inflammatory stuff. I developed Raynaud's syndrome and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. And over time, the distance of time between illnesses got smaller and smaller and smaller until I was just never well. And I was always ill. And I was on probably 6 or 7 different prescription medications at the age of 38. So I finally had enough. And the stage I was in is typically the stage that I think a lot of clients looking for a health coach are in. You finally get to the point where you're desperate and you'll try anything and you'll throw as much money at the problem as you can possibly afford just to get well. That was me. And I hired more of an alternative medicine practitioner who fixed me, basically. But he fixed me with me. And this is what lights my passion about health coaching is he educated me. He gave me choices. And we started with the foundational pieces that were easy for me to control. Number 1, diet, right? Number 1 was maybe changing and rethinking how I was working out because of the stress I was under. The other big thing was stress and sleep. And he gave me some tools and some recommendations on how to manage that. And given the type of personality I am, type A kind of self-starter kind of personality, I was able to take what he gave me and just run with it. Mm-hmm. So he wasn't really a coach so much. He wasn't there in between sessions, but he led with what a lot of health coaches use as part of their practice, right? The resources, the tools, the hey, I know you can do this. Here's what you need to do. Go do it. Type. And lo and behold, I could say legitimately well. I wasn't completely it's not as though I was completely quote unquote cured yet, but I looked back 6 weeks later like, holy cow. Meanwhile, I spent years being sick. So this is what lit my passion for health coaching. I just didn't know it at the time. I had a passion for health and I had a passion for sort of disrupting the narrative about what drives health, because everything I learned from this guy was literally 180 degree difference from conventional wisdom. I was the person that thought she was doing everything right. I was eating a low fat, whole grain diet, lots of low fat yogurt and whole grain muffins, exercising, a lot of cardio. I can sleep when I'm dead mentality, would get out of bed early to work out, like all that stuff. Literally all of that, which is what I thought was going to make me better, was literally making me worse. And boy, was I pissed off, Erin. I was so mad that I started a little blog, which I haven't written for in forever. As a matter of fact, it's now gone. But it was called Mom Gone Paleo. It was a little alter ego that I had. And the term paleo came out of the fact that when I was looking for recipes for foods that didn't have certain ingredients, I kept finding reference to this thing called the paleo diet. And that's when I sort of jumped into that. I was never sort of prescribed a paleo diet. My doctor never used that term. It's why I never use that term with my clients. I never use a dietary term. I talk about nutrient-dense whole foods just like he did. So lo and behold, I finally one day, I had a friend of mine, one of the 3 people maybe who read that blog, that was like, you know what, clearly you're passionate about this. Have you ever thought about becoming a health coach? I didn't even know what that was. I did some research on it. I eventually took my first course. And that sort of started the whole thing, and started trying to haphazardly build a business by myself, not knowing what I was doing while I was working 50 or 60 hours a week with children, right? And boy, did I stumble and fall a lot those first few years. And really never really entertained the idea of making a career change seriously because it was so freaking hard those first few years, until again, you find access to resources and tools, and you listen to people that actually know what they're doing and actually try to implement it yourself. And I finally put my big girl pants on, or like, all right, I got to figure out a runway. I got to figure out a way out of this. That's where my finance background came into play of let's build a plan. Right. And then I eventually got out. I opened a gym with my husband and another partner. That gym finally allowed me to leave finance for good and really just get entrenched into health and wellness. And it was through the course that I took, the same one you took, the original sort of Primal Blueprint Expert certification, that introduced me to Mark in this community, that eventually led me to my work with Primal Health Coach Institute and all the amazing things that we're doing here. It's what led me to being a professional health coach and helping others. That's kind of long, but it's kind of hard to encapsulate 10 years, you know?
Yeah, I think you did a great job. So what we have in that origin story is the health struggle. It's so interesting. Like whenever I hear your story, like upper respiratory symptoms are one, it's a cluster of symptoms that I don't hear a lot. When I think about my clients that come with like inflammatory type conditions, but that was how your systemic inflammation was presenting itself.
Yeah. I didn't have digestive problems. I didn't have acne or skin problems. I didn't have joint aches. I had this chronic inflammation through my sinuses. That was how my body manifested itself. And if you hear Mark Sisson's story, well, he had digestive problems too, but he had chronic respiratory issues too. We were both in that chronic cardio pattern too. So I wonder if there's a connection there, but
interesting. No, it is interesting because, all the other things you just mentioned, the gut health, the gut rot, skin, joints, those are the ones that people kind of obviously connect to something's off kilter, but it's like a chronic sinus infection is something that maybe folks would think, well, I guess this is just it for me.
Well, what's interesting is at the end of the day, what healed me was focusing on my gut, because those respiratory, so having these constant upper respiratory problems leading to various infections led me to taking copious amounts of antibiotics, which killed my immune system. This is what that naturopathic doctor told me, is I had like very little immune system function left. It's why I could not go for any meaningful length of time between illnesses, because anytime I got near a pathogen, I got sick. And it was because my gut health was destroyed. It just wasn't manifesting itself in digestive problems. Like I wasn't having diarrhea, I wasn't constipated, it wasn't anything like that. But having poor gut health, this is the way that poor gut health manifested itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just think it's interesting, and I love geeking out on that when because it's kind of a leap to make for a lot of people. But truly, when you're chronically inflamed like that, you're preoccupying your immune system with honestly stupid bull crap, like working too hard, overtraining, eating diet food. Like it's just interesting. Okay, so I love how you described when you left not when you left your career, but when you became impassioned about health. I think this is what happened. So I think this is probably an origin story that a lot of coaches can relate to. I got a little sick. I learned a little bit about my body that was unconventional or different than what I had been doing. I got kind of angry. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to now help people. And you described building this business, and it was such chaos. And it was like what you described was that it didn't really come easily. It wasn't like, boom, now I'm a health coach.
Right.
And I know this is a pep talk you give folks a lot on the phone when you're working as the admissions director at our school. Speak to that a little bit more. Like for coaches who are in the early stages, they know what they want to do. They know who they want to help. They have a sense of like what maybe their program or protocol will be like. They have the nuts and bolts in place and maybe are expecting like, I'm just going to go do this. What more can you say about this transition into a health coaching practice?
So I think the first thing I would advise is, so for me from the beginning, the job I had, I didn't have to make this a business. I made plenty of money doing what I was doing before. This was a passion project. And that's the mindset I went into this with in the beginning. And because of that, I think it made the entire thing harder. So even those that are thinking, you know what, I only want this to be a side hustle anyway, or I'm really not looking into making this a business. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, no big deal. But the benefit of getting organized and having it structured is going to benefit you regardless of what you're hoping to do professionally with this. My biggest issue is I was unorganized. I was very like blank slate. Everybody's coming to me from a different place. I have to have this separate, unique sort of approach for every single person. And broadly speaking, like that's true, but you still need to have structure. And there are still some core tenets that are kind of always true about the coaching relationship, about how you onboard a client, about the speed and flow of information for people, how you approach each session. So I did not know what I was doing because the program that I graduated from never really taught me. And I wasn't sure of my own identity in the beginning and what I wanted to do, that I really floundered for a while to try to determine that.
Yeah.
And it was when a potential client, no, I take this back. It was a client of mine from my other business that was asking me about this, that was like, well, what does a health coach do really? And you know what, Erin, I didn't really have a good answer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I realized, boy, I better define that.
Yeah.
I better really define that for myself. And here's the thing. Guess what I did? I went to Dr. Google and I Googled, what does a health coach do? And once again, there was no really sort of common thread of a definition that was the same across, like an accepted definition. So that's when I was like, I guess I better define this for myself. And then that really created an underpinning of allowing me to get much more organized, really getting clearer on what I wanted to do, what I truly believed in as the core tenets that were the basics of. And then once I had a program that I felt was flexible enough to serve just about any, because at that point, I really didn't have a niche. I didn't really understand that. But I had a problem I was trying to solve.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that created a lot more confidence that allowed me to, when I was approached by a new client, because again, I wasn't actively marketing. And to be fair, I'm really still not, well, we'll get to that. I wasn't actively marketing, but what I was doing was I was marketing through example. I lived my life. I talked to everybody. When someone asked me a question, I answered it to the best of my ability, or I asked another question. Like, I was the embodiment of what I was trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. And through that, I brought on about as many clients as I really wanted at the time, right? I really only had a handful at a time, but that's all I really wanted at the time. And you know what? That was enough for the first few years to help me build confidence and to create a bigger vision. It's what led me to, you know what I really think I want to do? I want to open a gym. Here's why. But the first thing was I needed to really define with confidence what I thought health coaching was and what I wanted to do.
Interesting. That felt important to you?
Yeah.
Does it feel important to you now? Like, looking back, like if you were starting today, I'm just thinking out loud, because what you said was, first of all, you said, I better define this for myself, mm-hmm. because the definition you were finding on Google wasn't maybe meeting the mark for you. And you're also embodying what you wanted to be, deliver, teach, encourage, nurture. Does it feel as important to you now to have a definition of health coaching?
I think it's important to have a definition of what I do and don't do.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the biggest difference, right? I mean, we see, people ask when they call in and talk to me, what is this really all about? What do health coaches do? What's a typical day? Like there's no, that type of definition, I think, is going to differ from person to person, right? But when I strip away a lot of the stuff that I don't do, and what I really feel like what it is I focus on, then that helps make it a lot easier to help explain to people about, it's my role as your coach to help you stop dieting and just learn how to eat, to stop exercising and learn how to move and why, and to want to move, right? To stop trying to force yourself to sleep and do work on all the little aspects throughout the day that actually help make sleep natural. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's through that nurturing, the empowerment, the education, and the support that happens for you. But I'm here to aid you. I'm not here to tell you what to do.
Right.
And it's still kind of hard for people to wrap their minds around that and understand why that's valuable. I think there's still a disconnect. Okay, if I give you money, you're going to give me something rather than I'm going to give you money and you're going to make me work.
Yeah.
And do something for myself. That's a weird concept for people.
You know what? It is interesting because the health coaching relationship is not always a tangible thing, like a thing that you might go to a store and buy.
Right.
But when a client really knows what they're going to get, which is this autonomy, self-efficacy, knowledge, honestly, extraction from the spiral of maybe bad, unuseful health advice I've been playing with for decades, it's worth it to the right client. So it is really important to get clear on what problem you solve for whom, because that's going to absolutely resonate for the person it's meant to resonate with. I like what you said, which is that you needed to come up with a definition of what you do and what you don't do. I actually think that's a really important marketing exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Like here's who I help and here's who I don't help, by the way. So if anybody out there is getting stuck on who they help, we'll start with who you don't want to help. That can help you kind of back into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. You get to build your own practice. It can be whatever you want it to be. Yeah.
Like just from the mindset of like, so living in Illinois at the time, I've since moved. That's something we can talk about. But when I found out, again, after I got certified, actually, after I'd been in business for a couple of years, there are these laws that say there are things I can't do that I was completely unaware of. One of which was I can't build meal plans for people in Illinois. Which actually at the time when I figured that out was such a relief because I tried to do it and boy, was it a pain in the butt. It was hard. I didn't really know what I was doing. I mean, it just took a lot of time and effort because I was trying to do all this stuff by hand. Right. And what a relief to just be like, you know what, that's not my role. That's not what health coaches, first the language I was using, well, legally Illinois says I can't do that, right? A very negative way to think through that instead of, well, you know what, that's not really what health coaches do. That's not really, if you want a diet and you want a meal plan, you can go pay a dietitian to do that. But how successful has that been for you in the past? How many diets have you been on in the past? Why are you here? It's always bringing the conversation back to, but what brings you here? Mm-hmm. What was it about past efforts that you think made you unsuccessful and land here? But what did you learn from those experiences that you can bring with you to this relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. Meal plans are the worst. So
yay for that.
Able to do that. Okay, so great deep dive into the origin of Laura. Now where are you? What's up with you? So you're physically in a different location. Yeah. But that was a part of a bigger plan that you'd had for many years. So tell us about starting over in a new place, building this life you've always wanted. So where are you physically in the world now? You were in Illinois, now you are.
Now I am in Florida. I'm in northern Florida. So for years, I have been telling my older children who are now adults that as soon as they're adults, mommy's moving someplace warm and I hope you come with me because I do not like the cold of Illinois at all. I didn't know how I was going to get there. I was still in another career. I'm like, come hell or high water, I'm getting out of here. So the good news is when I got remarried, Brad was very on board with that. So, and the beautiful thing about what we do as health coaches, for those of us that want to work independently and want to be location agnostic, this works beautifully because had I still been in that other career, I would have to a certain degree been tied to Illinois because that's where all my relationships were. To try to pick that up and move it someplace else, I would have literally had to start from scratch and finding a company that would allow me to do that and pay me well to do that, not pay me as a beginner because I don't have any existing relationships. That would have been tougher versus doing what I'm doing now. I can literally pick up my whole business and just take it wherever I want to go. The only difference is I'm just in a slightly different time zone. So the only thing that was really keeping us to Illinois was the gym. But we didn't have to, we made plans to sort of replace us physically there for my partner Hector so he wouldn't be drowned. We did leave some money behind temporarily because it happened in the middle of COVID. But with the understanding that once they got back on their feet, they'll be able to buy us out. And we just did our research. Where do we want to go? I don't know if you've ever really thought through this, Erin, but like when there's not one thing specific taking you to a place like a job or family or whatever, and thinking through where you might want to live. Mm-hmm. Wow, that was kind of mind boggling. We just knew we wanted it warm. We knew we wanted access to water and what have you. So And my dad had a home in Savannah. So that's kind of narrowed us down to a particular area. We traveled around and we landed here in North Florida. It's St. Augustine. It's got the best school district in the state. I now have two smallish children. They're 7. So school districts were important. It has a vicinity to my dad. The state laws here in Illinois are a little more liberal than they were in Illinois. I'm sorry. Yeah. The state laws here in Florida are more liberal than they were in Illinois. I'm not sure if I'm going to actually expand the scope of what I do. I was kind of happy with what I was doing in Illinois, but the opportunity is there and there's no state tax. So we landed in northern Florida. It's been a year. August was a year, and it was just the best decision we could have made. I mean, we did not know that when we left Illinois, how bad things would have gotten as far as restrictions and lockdowns due to the pandemic. But the writing was on the wall there. I was definitely eager to leave. And I'm telling you, it's interesting how when things are meant to be, things work out. We found the right home at the right price. Brad found the job he needed. Like, we had great schools and everything just snapped into place. So now I'm in a position where I am restructuring my practice, because in the past, I really kind of ran everything through the gym.
Right.
And I can't do that anymore. So I finally got my new website up and running, thanks to a friend of mine. His name's Greg Taylor. He runs a sort of a media marketing business, and he does a phenomenal job if anybody's interested. But he got my website up and running for me. There's a couple of things I want to add to it, but now I finally have my own separate landing page with some functionality on there. I am still, right now, the clients that I'm working with are still based on referral. This is the benefit of being in the business for a long time and treating your clients well, because my primary source of new clients is still referrals. And also the fact that I moved down here and I live my lifestyle, and all the people in my little neighborhood understand that I'm always out walking. I look fitter than everybody else. I talk about this stuff all the time. People ask what I do, and lo and behold, several women like, hey, I really need to talk to you. And this is a mechanism that I was used to. So I'm sort of rebuilding and rebranding my entire business, from sort of Absolution CrossFit and all the nutrition and health coaching I did there to CoachLaura.fit. That's my new website and the name of my business, where if you take a look at sort of how the website's built and my messaging is really towards my typical client, which is a woman like me, right? A woman close to my age with children, perhaps she's working, that really the primary focus there is dropping some body fat, equalizing and raising her energy levels and lowering stress. That's really my primary focus. But I recently had the opportunity to work with a corporate wellness client that's been phenomenal. And kind of has me rethinking, hey, do I kind of have two separate tracks here with my business, or do I pivot a little bit?
Interesting. Lots to kind of unpack there. It's interesting. Like, I just think it's interesting you talking about leaving Illinois. And you said the only thing that I really had keeping me there was the gym and just everybody and everything you've ever known, basically.
Right. Well, financially was the gym, right? I mean, right. I think I knew when I knew that I wanted to move that I was going to have to leave my family behind, the family that wasn't going to come with me. And so I was mentally and emotionally prepared for that. It's never easy. And I cried when I left, but other than my mother, who like physically is not well, everybody has come to see me multiple times, and we've gone back to see them. Yeah. But right. I mean, for the most part, I mean, I've lived in Illinois for the past 25 plus years, essentially my entire adult life. So, but from a financial kind of stability point of view and from a professional point of view, that's what was keeping me there.
Well, the point is that it wasn't easy. Like, you had to reconcile a lot of things.
Correct.
But you wanted to, right? I'm into this little season of my own coaching practice, which I'll just quickly drop in here, is this idea of making mature decisions like a grown-up.
Right.
And harsh truth here, petulant energy is not helping anybody. Like, well, I don't want to. It's going to be hard. We got to do hard things sometimes. So anyways, it was a hard thing that you did, but you really, really wanted it. Right. So the parallel between, you picking up and moving your whole life somewhere where you wanted to be, even though it was hard, is so similar to, maybe our health coaching clients who want to have better health and a better life, and maybe are dragging their heels on doing the hard stuff to get there. Right. I just think that there's something to that we can do hard things. We have to do hard things sometimes if we really want the life that we want. Right.
There's a lot of little things that go into preparing for the big thing. Right. And then someday the big thing comes. Right. Yeah. So it's about doing all the little things to prepare you for making that bigger step. So this is a conversation I have on the phone with people all the time that would love to leave the career they're in and move into something like this. and they just can't get their arms around how that's going to work. Like, I can't afford to do that. And it's, well, not right now. You can't, let's change that language. I can't afford to do that right now. What do you need to do now in order to be able to afford to do that later? What are those smaller steps and the things that you need to get into place to make that bigger leap not as big? And it takes it from being or seeming insurmountable and overwhelming to exciting. That's really the difference between those two things, right? The physical response your body has to something exciting versus scary and overwhelming is kind of the same. The rest is just mental. So it's preparing yourself and doing all those smaller things that change something from scary to exciting.
Yeah, organization is a big theme here for you, I can tell. Okay, so then you left brick and mortar gym, which is where you had been plying much of your health coaching trade. And now you have, like many, sort of forced to go virtual in a manner of speaking. So got your website up and running, figuring out how to take clients remotely. How was that exercise for you generally? Was there discomfort, or were you ready?
Even though, technically that sort of health coaching side of my gym was done, quote unquote, through the gym, a lot of my conversations were done remotely anyway. I would say maybe about half my clients came from the gym. The other half came from someplace else. And even a lot of my gym clients would just as soon talk over the phone rather than meet in person. So I was used to that method. Some did prefer that we meet in person. I had a family that I was working with, a husband and wife, and I went into their home every week. And sat down on the couch with them in their home. They weren't all that far from me, and they wanted to see me face to face. I had another one that she just loved the coffee shop. So I was meeting her there, and we were having a conversation there, and that's fine. But, I have just as many people who are just as busy as I am that want to save themselves the 20-minute ride there and back. 20 minutes there, 20 minutes back. That's 40 minutes, right? They'd rather just jump on the phone or Zoom or Skype or FaceTime or something like that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that takes me back to the early days of sitting on people's couches. so fun. Okay, so your ideal client in your private practice is women like you. And then you mentioned that you have this corporate client, which I'd love to know more about. But what's interesting about a corporate client is that you are kind of delivered this batch of clients whom maybe your ideal client and many of whom aren't.
Right.
So let's talk about this corporate client. So how many people are you working with at this company?
So we managed to get about 175, maybe a little over, people to opt into this corporate wellness program. However, we don't have 175 of them that are actively engaged, right? We don't, they jumped in because the corporation offered it and it was free to them and it was pushed, right? The corporation were trying to get as many people to jump in on this as possible. So I feel confident in saying not all 175 people are actively engaged with this. I can't really say how many actually did until we survey it. We'll do that at the end. We'll send out a survey to really gauge how many people opened their, the lessons that they were receiving and were, to what degree they were engaged in the program. But so the way we're structuring this is we've got what's essentially, through an app-based platform, but you can use any educational delivery tool platform that you can give people access to, where it's almost like a little bit of a digital course where every day they're getting some sort of piece of education, a new topic, and then associated with that piece of information is some sort of activity or some sort of like thought exercise on getting them to sort of engage in that information. And then the other thing we're doing is layering sort of broad behaviors that they can build on week to week. And then what we're doing in addition to that is every week offering a live Zoom-based webinar class that sort of allows people to say, hey, these are some questions that came up this week. This is what my experience was. but then also preparing them for some of the lessons and what they're going to learn coming up in the week ahead, and then answering questions. So it provides a bit of a live format for people. And, when we first started it early, we had 80 to 90 people on each one. Now that we are coming to the end, we still have great engagement, 50 or 60 people probably on these live calls. Plus they get the recording.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, right now the feedback we're getting is all unsolicited feedback. So it's for the most part great. We'll see once it's solicited feedback and we hear from the folks that really haven't engaged, kind of what could we have done better.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. Like, we have folks who are vegan and vegetarian. I've got folks that are dealing with real sort of diagnosed health problems that are asking me questions that are really not within my scope that I have to dance around. We've got men, we have women. I've got people in their 20s, people in their 60s. I've got people who are athletes, people who have lived like a veal for the past 3 years and haven't moved at all. And you're telling me I should move. So it's a huge variety of people and starting places and sort of levels of competency that we're trying to juggle. But boy, has it been fun.
Yeah.
Really fun.
One thing that's interesting though about the approach is that like the employer paid for it, which is amazing. I mean, gosh, that's awesome. Imagine having an employer that would pay to enroll their staff in something like this. It's incredible. So it became, in a sense, it's free for the staff, right?
Right.
So do you, just as your gut instinct, that the folks who remained engaged, or sorry, the folks who you lost, the folks who kind of dropped off, that became kind of disengaged, maybe it's because they weren't maybe ready. They jumped in because it was offered and there wasn't a strong motivation underlying?
100% for sure. Right. I think there was a very strong push from the employer to get as many people enrolled as possible. So people are like, fine, I'll sign up, but they weren't, and this is just a great lesson to learn for health coaches in general, is to try to convince somebody to hire you is fruitless. They are going to be the biggest pain in the ass client. You need to engage with folks that are hell yes, sign me up type clients. And the ones that message me all the time, even, now that we're 10 weeks in, the ones that participate in the live calls, the one that send in messages, engage in those were no doubt the people that were sort of early adopters and were immediately like, hell yes. Sign me up. Mm-hmm.
That's right. If it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. Mm-hmm. That's interesting because lots of coaches are interested in corporate wellness, like in delivering corporate wellness. And I think it's because a lot of coaches come from a corporate background, and you do and I do as well. And whenever I think about it, it's like, boy, at any given office, there's some people who would really buy into this and a lot of people who wouldn't. So I think that's just important, to your point, for a coach to, especially a coach in any practice, but especially in a corporate wellness practice, you might end up with some pretty disengaged people, but that's okay because you still have 50 to 60 or more potentially very engaged people, which is an incredible amount of people,
right,
to have kept engaged for 10 weeks. Like, pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think when folks are like, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to at least give it a try. And I think the way the content's delivered, we cover kind of the big rocks first, the stuff that, are going to move the needle and make a difference for people early. And when people give those things a try and they think, wow, okay, it keeps them engaged. There's that instant sort of biofeedback, like, okay, well, this kind of makes sense.
Okay. And I like how it's delivered. So there's an app, and this is delivering the lessons.
Correct.
You are supporting that with weekly teaching webinars.
Correct.
Cool. And then there's also a feedback piece. They can message you.
Correct. So I'm not getting on the phone and having one-on-one conversations with people, but they have the ability to message me with their, how they're feeling, asking questions, where I've got the ability to reply, which usually my first reply is, can you please clarify that? Or am I hearing you correctly? I learned after 10 years of coaching that it's rare that if someone asks me a question, I should just immediately answer. I always am looking for clarification and trying not to make assumptions. and it's an opportunity too for me to share ongoing resources that way. So for example, I had a lot of questions come in about the impact of eating more protein
Right.
and the ... What about animal fat that comes with that and the impact on cholesterol?
Mm-hmm.
This is a very common question.
Super common.
And I'm not a doctor, so I can't say what I really think necessarily, but I can provide them with resources and articles with opinions, but most importantly, understandable data that allows that client to think differently and ask some more questions.
Yeah.
We also have a resource that we can refer people to through Precision Health Reports, saying if you really are concerned, here's a great way for a little bit of money out of pocket for you to get a more well-rounded, deeper picture of what your risk, because at the end of the day, cholesterol is not the problem. The problem is inflammation and actual heart disease, right? The connection is that a rise in cholesterol is a problem as far as increasing your risk for heart disease. So if we can help clients feel more comfortable that, okay, my risk of heart disease is actually relatively low, regardless of what my cholesterol says, they've got the ability to paint a different picture. And oh, by the way, they can have this resource checked as often as they want. I mean, it'll cost them a little bit of money every time they do it, but they've got the ability to track this stuff and really understand how it's impacting them.
Yeah. It's like the question isn't, what about cholesterol? The question is, I'm afraid of cholesterol. Can you quell this fear for me? And the way we can help do that is not by dogmatically or conspiracy theorizing the cholesterol myth, but it's about, here's some education, here's some resources. Hey, why don't you get your levels checked? Then you'll have actual data on yourself that can help you to feel more confident.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's a cool approach because even though you're using an app to deliver the material, which I think is a great way, I feel like every coach should be using some kind of app to deliver their educational content. Just gonna put that out there, whether it's an app like you're using, or a learning management software like a Thinkific or a Kajabi, or a practice management solution like Practice Better.
Yep.
Have some kind of technology to deliver education, but there is still a coaching component.
Right.
Hey,
right. So,
yeah.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because my father is using Noob, which everyone's heard of, right? I've gotten some people that have used it and really loved it, and people that have used it and they're like, meh. But the reason my father's using it is because my stepmother, God love her, is trying to help him pay attention to how much he's eating, when he's, she's just trying to make him aware, which I appreciate. But it's billed, or it's marketed as a coaching app. But when I take a look at how he's engaging with it, it's he's just tracking his food and his macros. He's not engaging with the behavioral side of it. I'm assuming that's there because that's what they market. I've never actually used Noob at all. So anybody listening that might be more aware of it, I'm making an assumption that there is some sort of coaching or behavioral component to their app, but he's not engaging with it. He's engaging with, and I have absolutely no doubt that this is common, because my dad is not particularly unique, right? My dad is very representative of a typical health consumer. So our program doesn't have the only thing we're tracking in this app is behaviors and sort of self-assessed markers, things like mood. We do give people the ability to track weight, right? How much they weigh, if that's something that they want to track. But we also give them the opportunity to track how much sleep they're getting and the quality of that sleep, how they view their energy levels in the morning versus the afternoon, tracking mood and stress levels and things of that nature. The other thing we are more concerned with tracking is not your macros, but did you engage with a behavior? Did you engage with eating supportive foods, which is one of them? Did you engage with moving today? So what we're trying to do is, rather than sort of tracking your macros and all of this stuff, is, are you engaging with the behaviors that are going to make a difference?
Yes.
That's the difference between this app and some of the other ones that are out there. And little spoiler alert, this app that we've built is something Primal Health Coach has come out of, that I'm using with this corporate wellness client that again, maybe a spoiler alert, I don't want to speak too soon, but our coaches at Primal Health Coach Institute will have access to if they want to be able to use it with their clients.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, spoiler alert, as somebody who helped build it, I was pretending like I didn't know all about it, but I did. It is this connection to the subjective experience that we were going for.
Yeah.
Like not tracking the objective data per se, but how do you feel about how well you slept? How do you feel about how well stress is being managed? How do you feel about how much and how well you moved? And that by itself, baked in the cake, starts to nurture this idea of autonomy and self-efficacy, which I will scream from the rooftops is the desired outcome of every coaching relationship, whether that's a corporate client where you have hundreds of people, a one-on-one client, whether it's an app, whatever, however you're delivering it. Self-efficacy and autonomy needs to be the outcome. And so the client needs to connect what their lived experience is rather than just some numbers.
Oh my gosh. And so I'll tell you the feedback. So the value of these weekly classes and the messaging is, I get to, so for example, we just, for the purposes of understanding the time that we're recording this, we've finished Thanksgiving here in the US and we're rapidly approaching Christmas. So this is the holiday season. And we had a class the Monday after Thanksgiving, a Zoom class. And of course, my first question is, how'd it go? Tell me about your experience with Thanksgiving. And what I loved about, I was waiting for oh my God, I crashed and burned. Oh my gosh, I didn't get any of that. Now, it could be that people were afraid to say it. What I got mostly was, you know what? I just let myself have a little bit of everything and then it was fine. I had another person say, normally I would have gone back for seconds or thirds, but because of how I was eating for about a month and a half leading up to this, I filled my plate one time and then I was full and I knew I was full and I didn't need more.
Yes.
And I'm like, ding, 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 like eureka, success, and then there were some people that said, you know what, I got to host Thanksgiving this year. So I got to control what was on the menu. And I fed people what I wanted them to eat, what I wanted to eat. And guess what? They loved it.
Yeah.
These are all just wonderful because from the standpoint of how the program that we built and again, testing this in a very diverse population of people, again, we're going to get some more feedback. Can you imagine how powerful this is going to be if you're using it with your niche client? Right? And you can, to a certain degree, kind of predict what they're going to be. Unbelievable. Right? But focusing on behaviors, focusing on habits and concepts and having people track those things instead of like every morsel of food, every calorie, it was a game changer. And there are some people that were using other apps to track this kind of stuff too, that realized, wow, holy cow. Okay. So this whole time I've been tracking this, but if I just focus on this behavior of maybe only eating when I'm hungry, I lost 2 pounds, right? Do I really need to track all these calories if I just only eat when I'm hungry? Yeah. It's kind of, to use your favorite term, effortless.
Yes, it is. Well, I think it's so amazing that you had that outcome. Thanksgiving is such a touchstone in a manner of speaking in terms of like how behavior change and new health and food behavior, specifically how food behaviors can sort of manifest in real life. Like in real life, going through a regular day of life, we have a certain amount of control over our food and that's, easier. And then we have Thanksgiving and this happens once a year, every year,
right.
Not going anywhere. And plus there's the other, feasts of the year like Easter, Christmas.
Yeah.
So it's like not learning to, but fully experiencing navigating a big, scary diet busting meal like that and coming out of it like, that was great. I enjoyed it. I had so much fun. I hung with my family. I ate delicious food. I didn't overdo it. Like just coming through it feeling like, wow, I'm not in the shame spiral. I don't have to claw myself out of this hole and like where I'm feeling disappointed in myself. Like that to me is the cherry on top. Like, I don't care what you ate, but you don't feel disappointed in yourself. Can you see how incredible that is? When was the last time you came out of a giant feasting season not feeling like you've screwed it up,
Right.
To me, that's so exciting.
It's so funny because I think there's a lot of coaches that put off running a group program until after the holidays. I think starting it before the holidays is the best way to do it because it prepares people to navigate situations like this. I mean, we start with Halloween, which is essentially all about candy.
Mm-hmm.
And then you move into Thanksgiving, which is all about gluttony, comfort foods, and pie. And then you move into Christmas, which again is all about, at least it was all about Christmas cookies and chocolate, and then of course some sort of meal. And everybody has their own traditions and sort of the other foods that, and some traditions, it's a 2-day deal, man. It's Christmas Eve and Christmas. So you've got like this, end of October through the end of December where it's just nonstop food. That if we can get clients prepared ahead of time, metabolically prepared for that ahead of time, and this time of year can actually turn out to be no big deal. I think that's going to be my big nugget moving forward is, hey, you know what? No, we got to get people started on this early so that they know how to navigate through it. And this experience with this corporate client has me rethinking, like, look, I've got all these connections from my past career and a bunch of professionals that I've known for years with organizations and business models that are notorious towards ill health, stress, and other issues, alcoholism, what have you, that this can solve. It can really help solve a lot of this. So, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Very cool. Well, it was really fun catching up with you. You've had a lot of exciting stuff since we last spoke. Moved to Florida, rebuilding your practice sort of from brick and mortar to totally virtual, connecting with this big corporate client, plus all the fun stuff you're doing for Primal Health Coach Institute, still as our admissions director, still on the phones, shaping the hearts and minds of aspiring health coaches every day.
I get the best job. I get to talk about health coaching all day with folks that are interested in talking about health coaching. It's like the best job ever.
Yeah. And we get to do it here too. And we'll keep doing it for a whole another year. We're off on year number 4 together. That's completely wild, but I'm grateful we got to reintroduce you to our listeners. And thanks for catching us up. So anybody who wants to follow Laura, where should they follow you?
Oh my gosh. So there's my Instagram. I think I'm at coachlaura.fit on Instagram. On Facebook, I think just Laura Puglisi Rupsis, Puglisi, Puglisi, being my maiden name. And then there's my new website, coachlaura.fit. There's not a ton there yet, but more to come.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks for catching up, Laura. It was lovely.
Awesome. Thanks, Erin.
This podcast was brought to you by Primal Health Coach Institute. To learn more about how to become a successful health coach, get in touch with us by visiting primalhealthcoach.com/call. Or if you're already a successful health coach, practitioner, influencer, or thought leader with a thriving business and an interesting story, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us at hello@primalhealthcoach.com and let us know why we need to interview you for Health Coach Radio. Thanks for listening.